great to be here. I'm sure a lot of you know my story or have heard bits and pieces of our story by now, and I'm thrilled to be here. I really am thrilled and honored to be here. You're going to see a clip in the background, and this is part and parcel of what we're going to talk about today. But I want to talk about what I learned. Because you don't go through something like that, hopefully you don't go through something like that and don't have a lesson or lessons. And I have many that I'm hoping to share with you today. So I went to Kenya because I needed to shake up my life. I really needed to shake up my life. And at the time, I was enjoying a tremendous amount of success. I was a senior VP at the Ottawa Hospital. I was, enjoying a very comfortable salary, great benefits, working I was on call 24/7, long days, dove right in, and it was great therapy. I just separated. It was a great place to just, drown my sorrows in work, and I'm a bit of a workaholic, so it was nice. And it looked really successful, right? Big fat treadmill that I was running on, kind of escaping myself. But all of this was really connected to a sense that I had when I was a little girl. I grew up in a very small town called South Porcupine. I'm related to most people there. My mom's one of 17 kids, so I had to leave if I was ever going to meet somebody who wasn't my cousin. I left, but I had this sense when I was little, and it didn't make any sense. A little white girl from the middle of nowhere, little Miss Nobody from the middle of nowhere, had this sense of something to come. I had this sense that something was bubbling underneath, and something big was going to happen. It's also tied to a motorcycle ride that I took. And if anybody knows me, they've probably heard me rant about how much I hate motorcycles. Hate them. But I took a motorcycle ride that changed my life. And of course, I don't hate motorcycle rides if any of our sponsors are motorcycle owners or... Kidding. But yeah, so within days of landing in Kenya in 2007, I was given this tremendous opportunity, this gift, of saying yes to becoming a mom to a yet unborn child, who was born only a few days after that conversation. Imagine that. So talk about fate stepping in. After finding that gift, though, and for any parent in this room or any parent watching, you know what that feels like. There's nothing that compares to being a parent. I was faced with the reality that I had, that this was not going to be the gift that I thought, that I was going to have to fight for this and fight for the right to become a mom. And it put me in a position of facing down the Kenyan government, the justice system and the government for more than 15 months to prove to them that I was his mom and I wasn't going anywhere. So just to give you a timeline, I landed in Kenya on January 11th, 2007. Devlin was born January 16th, 2007. Do the math. So I was barely over my jet lag, and I was becoming a mom. We didn't go to court until February 29th, 2008. We didn't get home to Canada until March 23rd, 2008. So we basically lived in Kenya. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened in between that this wonderful story doesn't tell you. I'm actually writing a book to tell you the rest of that story right now. And but it involved living through quakes and tremors, literally, in Kenya's capital, near misses with a bomb that went off on a street corner that Devlin and I were standing on just the day before, being held up at gunpoint at a place that we were living in, and we just happened to be out at the market. So I tell you, when I say I was changed and fate stepped in, I'm certainly not exaggerating. Oh, and then the other thing that you should know is that we were living in a country that was embroiled in a huge conflict after a stolen election, as we were basically in the middle of a civil war. That story's way longer than I have for TED Talks, but we'll get to that someday. But you also probably know or heard that when I was given the gift of becoming a mom, I made a promise. I made a promise to Devlin, first and foremost, his birth mom, Anyango, and her family, the country that I adopted him from, and of course a village near where he was born, where there are women working together that are living in a very patriarchal society, a very male-dominated society, who rose up together, these women, who also live in poverty, rose up in their village and started to work together to try and turn the tide of poverty, TB, HIV, AIDS, and malaria. And these women are working every day to support over 400 orphans, several hundred widows, grandmas, and great-grandmas to turn the tide in Kenya. And our paths crossed, and part of that promise is working to help them do the great work that they're doing through our charity, Hair Mission. The other part of the promise was that Anyango, Devlin's then 14-year-old birth mom, I promised her that I would help her get her education. So I started to pay her tuition. And because I wanted her to believe in my promise to her, because she was only 14 and most of her life was filled with broken promises, as she's an orphan herself, I went to court and became her legal guardian. And then I helped her siblings, because she's one of 6 orphaned kids, all adults now, and I supported them as well. So that's the kind of promise I make when I get engaged. I also want to talk about I want to talk about the work in the village and why the promise is so important. And it's because for me, and you'll start to get to know this about me as I tell my story, I'm a bit of an activist. I kind of came out of my poor mom as an activist, and I believe that inequality and poverty is completely unnatural, and that it's been designed by us in humanity. We designed it, which means, folks, we can fix it, right? But we actually have to put our hands on it together to do that, and that's what I'm hoping my message will be about today. Not just about this story, but really about those lessons. And I guess the thing I would say about understanding that is that, yeah, we can fix it. There's lots of things we can fix. My big question to all of you, and the question that I'm faced with every day is, do we actually have the will to do that? We have the means, but do we have the will? So far, I'd say, we haven't demonstrated that we do have the will. And my challenge is, let's prove otherwise, right? So I believe that everything is interconnected. I believe it. I live my life that way. I believe we all have power. I believe that we are often unaware of our power. And because we're unaware of it, we don't actually know how to actualize it. We don't actually know how to use it. And we deny ourselves of that. And when we harness that power, and everybody has it, we can actually make a huge, huge difference in the world, particularly when we harness power together. Because, you know, we're talking about ripples. Every small act of good with good intention connects to other good acts of good connection, of good intention. And when that happens, you can actually make not a ripple, but a massive wave of good to happen. Everything is absolutely interconnected. Understanding that everything has a purpose was really powerful for me. It actually totally changed the trajectory of my life. I'm really hardwired to give back. You can kind of see that, right? And to be a force of good in the world. But I've gone through periods in my life where I totally denied that and ignored that side of me and would fall off the path. And every time I would fall off that path, I would hit so much resistance and hardship and struggle and pain, it would remind me, listen, Cookie, you're on the wrong path. And I'm going to keep bumping up against you until you get back where you're supposed to be. When that sort of understanding of my purpose came to me, wow, universe opened up. Like, what power in that, right? And I want to tell you, people often talk about the stuff that I'm doing, because, you know, hair is one of the things I'm doing. You know, ask my parents what they do. They're like, I don't know. She does like 100,000 things. Like, we never know. She's just involved in so much stuff. But I want to tell you that people often approach me and say, it's so amazing what you're doing, and it's so, you know, it's so extraordinary. And I always say, no. Every single one of us can make a difference, can put our hands on things, can contribute. All of us can. That's what we're here to do, actually. We're here to learn, we're here to share, we're here to put our hands on stuff and make an impact. And I believe that every single one of us is extraordinary. I would prefer the stuff I do to become the norm. Let's make giving back normative instead of something that's worthy of a W5 documentary, right? Like, I just want this to be normal. I believe that if we can motivate other people in that same direction, wow, we could truly change the world. And you know what? It wouldn't matter if our governments aren't with us. It wouldn't matter, right? Because the citizens hold the power. You know, if citizens all started to kind of work together and say, you know, in our neighborhood, this is going to be our priority and we're going to do this together. You know, in our province, this is a priority, we're going to do it together. Governments, I tell you, they want to get elected. They would quickly get on your bus and work with you and support you, and they would change your policies to enable good work. That's powerful. That's so powerful. The other thing I want to say is nobody's here to stand at the side of the road. None of us are. Except to wave at parades, you know, Santa Claus parades and that sort of thing, right? We're not here to just look at other people's success. That's not what this was about. Everything every opportunity that we've been given on this planet is about put your hands on it, get engaged, get involved, right? That's what we're here for. But for that to happen, we actually have to believe in ourselves. Do you honestly believe in yourselves? Do you honestly believe in the strength of your own being? The other thing that we have to do is we have to let go of the past. I've gone through all kinds of stuff. And I used to dwell on it. You know, I spent months and months in Kenya with a baby who couldn't talk back. I spent so much time in my head. And I started working through all of my history and my role in that history. And, you know, what had I done to kind of, to shape some of the bad things that happened? Because, you know, we're not passive actors in our lives. You know, we're all, you know, we can't just, you know, frame ourselves as victims. And the thing that I realized is I got to let go of it. Like, let go of it. Move forward. Ignore the negative voices in your head, right? Ignore them. You know, shut them out. And don't let other people block you. Block your light. And for God's sakes, don't block it yourself. There's enough things standing in your way. And you're the only one who can design your own outcome in your own life. We all love to point to other forces. It's the government, it's my husband, it's my, right? But really, we all have choices. We all have power. It all came back to me in January 2007 when I became Dublin's mom. I honestly believe that the universe said, okay, you've proven yourself, you're giving. And you also always say that everything happens for a reason. So here's one more test for you. You say that, I'm putting this child and this fate in front of you. Do you believe it or not? If you believe it, you're going to rise up and you're going to do and honor the opportunity that you have to become his mom, or you're going to run scared. And if you know my story, I said, yeah, I'm ready, I'm here, and I'm not leaving without my son. I'm not leaving without my son. When the universe drops these things, they're asking us, do you have the courage? Do you have the will to make a difference? And we can't do it alone. So though, again, you know, those small acts, they need other acts to make that a huge wave of good in the world. And one of the things that's kind of striking, and this is kind of where I'm wrapping up, is that, you know, we're a 24/7 wired society. Everything is connected, right? Like I'm on every kind of social media you can imagine. If anybody follows me, I'm like a crazy fiend out there tweeting, and right. But yet people are feeling more isolated and more disconnected than ever. Doesn't that seem counterintuitive? And you know what it is? It's not the technology, it's humanity. We're disconnected from each other. People are craving human contact. And you know, I was reading an article that was talking about isolation and loneliness is basically the next pandemic. It's the next big crisis that's coming. It seems ridiculous that it would be, right? How could that be? How could that be? In the article, this guy was writing about ants, not like bug ants, not anti-ants, so bugs, right? He said that he did a study. So isolated ants lived for 6 days. Ants in a colony lived for 66 days, which apparently is a good long life for an ant, right? Those ants were also healthier. They had no kind of illnesses. The other ants had all kinds of health problems. So being connected to each other, you can tell I'm not a scientist, right? Being connected to each other is actually good for us. We actually are healthier, less chronic disease, less obesity, more engaged, happier, less mental illness. So what's stopping us from getting out on the street and playing a little basketball, Dev? Or going and taking out your neighbor's recycling bin? Or going and checking on an elderly neighbor when you say, geez, I haven't seen them in a while. Like, where are they? Why don't you go check, right? Like, just go check. Get engaged. Get engaged. So the thing I'm going to ask you is, what does your colony look like? Are you fully engaged in it? And what will you do differently after today? What will you do differently after today? Will you start to make some ripples? Will you start to make some ripples? The meaning, life's meaning is right in front of you. You just have to grab onto it. You don't have to go to Africa and adopt a child and change adoption laws and adopt a village and start a foundation. Like I say, recycling bins or volunteering in church or at schools or, helping somebody cross the street. For God's sakes, have a conversation with somebody on a corner that you don't even know about the weather, because we're Canadian. We like to talk about the weather. So I'm going to tell you something. I have faith in every single one of us. I believe every act of good intention can change a life. That's why I do HERA. I believe that humanity together, when we can shape, laugh, and learn. We just need to find our way back there in fellowship and in community, in trust and mostly in love, or as we call it in our household, HERA. Thanks very much for listening.